Okay, welcome everyone. I think we're going to get started now. We have Minister Glubish and Mr. Walker on today. Good afternoon and welcome to our information session today. I'm Todd Banks, Executive Director here at the Sherwood Park and District Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to thank all the members for joining us today. I know how difficult times are for you because of this pandemic. And I hear daily from many of you the challenges that you as business people are facing. There's great frustration, stress, uncertainty. Please know that we at the Chamber here are doing everything we can to help you. That said, it's our pleasure to have our two representatives from the province, Minister Nate Glubish, MLA for Strathcona, Sherwood Park, and MLA Jordan Walker from Sherwood Park Constituency. Before our two MLAs give us some opening remarks, I'd like all participants to know that we have a list of questions on our Slido app. You can access that on our website, sherwoodparkchamber.com. Scroll down to the featured events and open up on April 17th calendar event and click on the Slido link. You can add more provincially scoped business questions and also upvote existing questions that you may like to be asked, and we'll ask those in order. So I'd like to call upon Minister Nate Glubish for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Todd, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. Really happy to be able to find new ways in this pandemic to stay connected with our community and our business community, and to help to answer questions about our government's response to this pandemic. So we know that these are unprecedented times. We know that these times are evolving day by day. So now that we're about a month in, I thought it would be really helpful to connect with you and just hear what are some of the burning questions on your minds that are impacting your businesses and your ability to navigate through this crisis. We know these are not easy times. There are no easy answers. There are no one-size-fits-all solutions, but our government is working very hard, first and foremost, to focus on the health crisis and to, we've said it a million times, flattening the curve. It is so critically important to ensure that our healthcare system does not get overwhelmed. But we're also very mindful of the economic fallout of this, with the global economy shutting down, also happening at the same time as a Saudi-Russian oil price war. We know that Alberta is going to have a very difficult road to recovery ahead of us, but really wanted to, while we recognize the challenges ahead, that we work together as a community to ensure that everyone has access to the most up-to-date and current information and understands what responses our province has made in light of this crisis. And so that's the purpose for this call. We may not be able to answer every question immediately online today, but if there are any remaining questions, Jordan and I, our offices, we will work with you to get those answers afterwards. And so with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague and friend, Jordan.
Well, thank you so much, Nate. Todd, can you hear me?
Absolutely, yes.
Great. Well, yeah, just to add to my colleague's opening remarks, just wanted to again reiterate that we're in extremely challenging times, as everyone knows, due to COVID-19. This is the first major global pandemic the world has faced since the Spanish influenza of 1918, 1919. But our government, as Nate said, is committed to supporting Albertans through this crisis, including, and very importantly, our business owners and businesses, small and medium-sized enterprises, as well as large corporations. And so we understand that Albertans are hurting during this time. And to again just echo Nate's comments, don't hesitate to reach out to our offices if you have questions or concerns with regard to COVID-19 and the impacts it's having on your business or as our constituents, frankly. And so with that, yeah, look forward to taking your questions today, and with a focus on provincial government supports. Thank you all for all that you do. We have more than 11,000 businesses in Strathcona County, no business tax or business license. We are an entrepreneurial hub, and especially our small and medium-sized businesses are the backbone of our local and Albertan economy. And Nate and I just want to recognize and thank you guys for all you do for our prosperity and well-being here in the county. Thanks, Todd.
Thank you, Jordan. Minister Glubish, maybe now you could give just a little bit of an update on the COVID-19 status from a provincial perspective right now.
Sure. Yeah. So I thought it would be helpful just to speak a bit to the where are we at in terms of the infection rate, and then I'll talk a little bit about the modeling that our premier spoke to a week or two ago, and why that's important, and why that highlights the actions that we've had to take as a government to slow the spread, and recognizing that ultimately is what is impacting your businesses. So as of our latest update yesterday, we had seen 162 new, which brought our total to 2,158. We have now seen 914 of those cases confirmed recovered, which is some good news. Unfortunately, we have seen now 50 deaths in total. One of the things that has been critically important in helping us to mitigate and slow the spread has been our testing protocols. We are leading the country and among the leaders of the developed world in our testing protocols. We have tested over 85,000 individuals since this began. We completed almost 2,800 tests yesterday alone, and we continue to scale up our capacity to test very aggressively. We believe very firmly that the more current the data is that we have, the more accurate the data is that we have, the better job we can do of finding out who is actually infected, and then doing the contact tracing to make sure that we know who have they come into contact with, who's at risk. By doing that very aggressively over the last month and a bit, we, I believe, have the best handle in Canada on where we're at. So in terms of where we're going, we've modeled what we call 3 different scenarios. There's a probable scenario, there's the elevated scenario, and there's an extreme scenario. And these are important for us to be mindful of, so that we understand what is our health care system able to handle, but also how does this impact our path to recovery going forward. So in the probable scenario, we would expect to be achieving the mid-peak of infections by, or achieving the peak of infections by middle of May. By that point, there would be a total of 800,000 total infections, and between 400 to 3,100 deaths. Given what we have been seeing so far to date, we believe that the probable scenario continues to be probable. And in that scenario, we will have more than sufficient capacity from a hospitalization perspective, and most importantly, from an ICU and a ventilator perspective. If Albertans do not continue to observe the social distancing requirements and the public health advisories, then in an elevated case, we would see the peak happen a bit sooner, and we would see closer to 1,060,000 infections, between 500 and 6,600 deaths. And if we see the extreme case where just people blatantly ignore the restrictions and stop taking this seriously, this is where things would get very dangerous. We would see a peak, by the end of April here, but more importantly, we'd see about 1.6 million total infections and between 16,000 and 32,000 deaths in Alberta. So I say all of this to say, first and foremost, what we have done as a government and what Albertans have done to comply with our orders is working. We are on the path to the probable scenario, and it is important to note that by doing so, we are saving lives. It's not easy, but it's important. If we fail to stay on this path, thousands, if not tens of thousands, of Albertans could unnecessarily die. And furthermore, it could push us to a point where our healthcare system is unable to handle the volume. But if we keep doing what we're doing, our healthcare system is well equipped, has the capacity, has scaled up, thanks to the actions of AHS, our health minister, our chief medical officer, and the premier. So I thought that would be important because it puts into context, why do we have to take the steps that we're taking now that are so difficult from an economic perspective? The reality is if we don't take these steps, this pandemic will get far worse. It will last far longer. It will impact far more people. And it will take us that much longer to emerge and focus on an economic recovery. If we keep doing what we're doing now, we will be in a position sooner to focus on the economic recovery. And so with that, I'll wrap up, and looking forward to moving on to your questions.
Thank you, Minister Glubish. So we're going to start asking some questions here from the ones that we have tabulated on our program. I just want to reiterate, though, that these questions, they should be provincial in scope and of a business nature as it relates to COVID-19. So those are the questions I'm going to pick off the program. The first, and Minister Glubish and Mr. Walker, you can decide who's going to answer which questions. You can just jump in after I ask the question. The first question is, I'm a sole proprietor, small business. I don't have employees. What aid programs can I access to keep my business alive? So far, I don't seem to qualify for any. Maybe you could just let us know what some of those programs, and I know there's other questions down farther here that would relate to this as well.
Jordan, do you want to jump on that one?
Yeah, sure. I can start, Nate, and then please feel free to compliment. So thank you so much for that first question. And that's a wonderful one. And we have lots of people who are in that situation. The first thing I would like to say is that with regard to that, I do know for people in that situation, the new federal government program, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, has been announced and tailor-made for people in sole propriety or self-employed situations. So I would encourage you to, first of all, look at the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit. Then, though, more broadly in terms of provincial supports, what I would say at a broad-based level is that some things that hopefully will allow some relief for your business is measures that we've announced, for example, with deferrals on encouraging banks such as ATB and other major financial institutions to defer loans, lines of credit, mortgages. Hopefully that will provide you some relief. I would encourage you to talk to your bank if you have one in your business enterprise you set up. Furthermore, we also have utility relief, including for small commercial operators. Maybe you would fit into that for up to a certain amount of period for the next, at least into June anyway. And then on corporate taxes, again, if that would apply to you, I would say that corporate income tax is deferred until August 31st, 2020, and that'll free up almost $2 billion in funds for business operators. I'll stop there and see if, Nate, you have anything to add. So those are the broad-based supports, but I'd really encourage you to look at the CERB, Canada Emergency Response Benefit Federal Program. Nate?
Sure, thanks, Jordan. So I think you covered that quite well. And what I would say is, so this is tricky, right? Because you have multiple levels of government responding to the same crisis. There's different levels of jurisdiction, and things are evolving every day. And it can be very difficult to keep track of all of the different announcements. And so what I would just encourage everyone on this call to do is to bookmark the alberta.ca/COVID-19 website. alberta.ca/COVID-19. This is where all of our government's actions and announcements and responses to the pandemic and the related economic concerns is posted and updated. This is updated twice a day. It's the most up-to-date source of information that you'll be able to find about the Alberta government's response. And it has everything from day one until now. this is where you can find the Premier and Dr. Hinshaw's daily updates, which are also a great source of information from the province. And then likewise, I would encourage you to look for the federal announcements and information from the federal government, so that you've got the two sources from the two levels of government who are taking the most action on this. So I don't want to add anything further there, other than that this is a tough time. We recognize it's a tough time, and it's important that you always have the most accurate information, and these are the places you can go to have that.
Thank you, Minister Glubish. Our next question, and a lot of this information is available on the Alberta website, government website, but this question here, what are banks and credit unions offering small businesses at this time?
Sure. So I just got to double check and bring that up here. But so I think this is important to know. This is another one of those areas where the multiple levels of jurisdiction are complicating the story, because the charter banks are all federally regulated, but ATB and the credit unions are provincially regulated. And so the federal government has, of course, made some announcements about the bigger banks in terms of deferrals and et cetera. But provincially, I know we've made it clear that there will be a room for mortgage deferrals and supports of that nature. So I think the best place to go for the specifics of that is, again, on our alberta.ca/COVID-19 site. And then you can go, I believe it'll either be supports for businesses or supports for Albertans. And that'll have, supports for businesses. And then you scroll down, there's banks and credit unions. And that'll have the latest of what's available there. And then in terms of if you're dealing with the bigger banks, important to follow what the federal government's interventions have been. And ultimately, we just ask that you work with your banker. Your banker is going to know that this is a tough time and it's not your fault. We're all in this together. And so in a lot of cases, we're just, of course, there will be some steps we can take as a government, but we do encourage that Albertans work with one another. And in this case, if you need to work with your bank, then work with your bank and be realistic about the impacts. And be aware of the programs, whether they be provincial or federal, whichever relates, and have those discussions. I think bankers, generally speaking, are going to be more receptive if you get involved and talk to them early about a plan than if everyone's just waiting until the last minute when things are at their worst. So strongly encourage you to work closely with your bankers and stay tuned with our government website for what the latest is from the government's actions.
Thank you, Minister. The next question I have is probably one that's on everyone's mind here. As we achieve flattening and lowering the curve, what will be the stage steps to renormalize people groups coming together that allow businesses to restart?
So I can take that one broadly, Todd, and then if Nate wants to add anything else or specifically, I would just say, as Nate laid out in his overall picture where we are with COVID-19, we are basing any possibility in the near term to the medium term of loosening these COVID-19 restrictions, including on business, based on the advice of our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, and her technical staff. And I think we all would agree has done an amazing job. As Nate mentioned, we are leading not only in Canada as a jurisdiction, but across North America. And quite frankly, we're now globally recognized for the great work she's leading the province on, and we're all leading together. And so if and when those possibility of easing of restrictions come in, be it in a staggered manner or one fell swoop, it'll be based on the information advice that she provides. Nate, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. I would just say I would echo, it's going to be based on evidence. It's going to be based on the advice of the medical professionals, Dr. Hinshaw and her team. And I would say it is likely to be a gradual return to normal. It's unlikely, I think intuitively we can all agree, it's unlikely we're just going to flip a switch and be back to normal. So, I would say the source for this information is going to be in the daily updates from the Premier and Dr. Hinshaw, which happens every afternoon, usually between 3 and 4. And you can find that all on the government website or the government's social media channels. And so stay tuned for that. And as we can start to take those steps, then that's where we'll be making those announcements. And so stay tuned. And in the meantime, we just need to keep focusing on everyone doing their part to observe the health guidelines and to continue to slow the spread. The better job we do on that, the sooner we get to start relaxing the restrictions and moving towards more of a normal status quo.
Thank you, Minister. Our next question, this is a big one for business. Can you tell us more about what the government of Alberta is doing for corporate income taxes and education property taxes?
So maybe I'll jump in on the corporate income taxes, and then Jordan, do you want to talk about the education property taxes piece?
Sure.
So on the corporate income taxes, as many of you probably heard, it's hard to believe it was a year ago that the election happened. But in our election campaign, we talked about the corporate income tax, the job creation tax cut, which was a path to reducing the corporate taxes in Alberta from 12% to 8% over 4 years. So we continue to move in that direction to ensure that we're going to have among the lowest corporate taxes in the country. And so that will continue. And then I believe, well, Jordan, do you want to just talk to the education property taxes? I got to double check something else that I might want to add after.
Yeah, certainly. Great question. On the education property tax, we are deferring that, and the education property tax rates will be frozen at last year's level, reversing the 3.4% population growth and inflation increase added to budget 2020. So yeah, we are deferring the education property tax rates. And the collection of non-residential education property taxes for businesses will be deferred for 6 months. Again, that will be deferred for 6 months, or both municipal and education property taxes are deferred for a shorter time in terms of the equivalent benefit. The other thing I'd like to point out, because Nate and I are aware, as is the government, about commercial tenancy issues, I would say on the education property tax deferral that commercial landlords are encouraged to pass savings on to their tenants. We're aware that a lot of commercial tenants are struggling right now, so commercial landlords are encouraged to pass on their savings to their tenants through reduced or deferred payments to help employers pay their employees, et cetera, and stay in business. So again, we're deferring that tax to support Albertans and businesses. Nate, anything else to add?
Yeah, sure. So just forgot to mention on the corporate income tax side, similar to the education property taxes, there's an extension to the corporate filing deadlines. And so that the collection of the corporate income taxes for the current year will be deferred until after August 31st of this year. So that will help, at least in this interim period, to provide some liquidity for Alberta businesses. And then I'll just add, sort of related, as we're talking about filings and tax filings. Well, another filing that for any of you who are corporations, you might be thinking about annual returns. If any of you have your annual returns coming due, and with all of the social isolation and challenges, and not all registries are open. There still are many, but not all of them are open. We've made it clear that we understand that some folks may not be able to do their annual returns. on time, and so no businesses are going to be involuntarily struck from the record due to a late filing. So again, stay tuned on our website for all of the details on that. But I want to just put, if any of you were thinking about that or wondering about that, or maybe you weren't, but maybe you should, rest assured that that's not going to be a burden that's going to throw you a curveball in this strange time.
Thank you, Minister. So our next question here is from one of our board members, and it's next in the queue for priority. And has the government considered changes to the rules which require person execution of testamentary documents like wills? So right now, Minister, this is your department. In Saskatchewan, you can do video conferencing for someone with COVID-19 for testaments. And what I think the law profession's looking for here is maybe fill that gap here in Alberta, where they can also use video conferencing. So there's physical distancing between the two parties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Well, that's a great question, Todd. Thanks. On the topic of these testamentary documents, we don't have that as a step right now. But what we have done, so this is tricky, right? Because part of it would be Service Alberta, part of it would be Justice, and so sometimes you have cross-ministry implications here. And what I can say is, for the execution of land title related documents for land transfer, so thinking about real estate, and the fact is that normally you would need in-person execution and notarization of any of those documents for the sale of a home or any other real estate property to take effect. And that could be very problematic in a time where folks have to self-isolate and where in-person contact is discouraged. So I did pass a ministerial order earlier this week or last week, I can't remember, to allow for video conferencing for witnessing and notarizing of land transfer related documents. That was 100% within my portfolio of responsibility because it's about the real estate industry. I'm in charge of the Real Estate Act of Alberta. I'm also in charge of land titles. And so that was something that we were able to do. And we did that in consultation with the Law Society of Alberta. So what I will say is we recognize that during these extreme times, we need to be open-minded to harnessing technology to solve problems in new ways, and that this might be a tool that we could consider. What I will need to do is take that away and speak to my colleague in the Ministry of Justice, because he'll have more context about the implications of, if we did do this, what are the pros and what are the cons, and is this something that we can consider? I don't have the answers to that right now, but it's a good question. I'll look into it, and what I'll do is I'll circle back to you, Todd, with what I find, and then you can share that with the folks who participated in this call.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. So what is being done for utility payments and workers' compensation board premiums? I know this is also something that's on the website, but for our listeners, this is some good news too for businesses.
So I can take the WCB, Nate, if you then want to take the utility.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, great. Yeah, great question. Very important. These two have big impacts on businesses. So we have deferred the WCB premium payment. Small, medium-sized, and large private sector employers can defer payments until 2021. Again, we are deferring the WCB premium payment until 2021. A few specific points. For small and medium-sized businesses, the government will cover 50% of the 2020 premium when it's due in 2021. This should save businesses almost $400 million. And then for you large employers, will have their 2020 WCB premiums deferred as well until 2021, at which time your premiums will then be due. And also employers who have already paid their WCB premiums in 2020 are eligible for a rebate or a credit. So that's the overview of what we're doing on the WCB premium payments, again, which we have deferred. I'll pass on the utility component of the question to Nate.
Sure. Thanks, Jordan. So on the utility payment side, residential, farm, and small commercial customers can defer their electricity and natural gas bill payments for the next 90 days. And but it's important to note that a payment system will need to be developed to help to pay back the deferred utility amounts within a reasonable time period. And so what we're encouraging folks to do in order to arrange for that deferral is to call their natural gas and electricity provider directly. So these programs are in place, and that's the first step to accessing it. So that's the best place to go to get started on finding some relief on the utility side.
Thank you very much for that. Business interruption insurance does not cover the situation due to provincial rules. Is there any help for businesses coming around this? And maybe I could explain a little bit more about that, because I've had many calls on that. So if your building burns down and you need a year to rebuild, there's business interruption insurance. But with this pandemic, it states in a lot of insurance claims or coverages that this is not part of that business interruption insurance. Is there anything that the province has looked into on that there can be some help for people in that area, or is this strictly an insurance contract issue?
Well, it's a tough question, right, Todd? Because obviously a number of businesses have taken out business interruption insurance as a precaution. I mean, it's a good risk management measure, and it's an effective tool to help try and prepare for unexpected events that might interfere with your ability to conduct your business. I'm not aware of any specific provincial rules that apply to those contracts that would either allow or disallow this. I think at the end of the day, this comes down to the individual insurance contracts. And if those contracts have, say, for example, a force majeure clause that is an exemption or an exception to the coverage, then, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a question of does the insurance company, can the insurance company justifiably consider the current scenario to be a triggering event for the force majeure exemption. It's not, I don't believe it's the province's role to make a determination in that regard. If you disagree with your insurance company on this, then that's a matter of contract law and dispute. This is one of those really sticky issues. It's tough. I wish I could just snap my fingers and say, don't worry, you're going to be taken care of. But in this case, if your insurance policy does not provide you with business interruption coverage, I mean, coming back to the question of is there any help for businesses around this? Well, I would suggest that everything we're doing is the government's response to help you through this time. We're doing everything that we can that is practically possible with the information we have and the balance sheet we have. Quite frankly, we have to be mindful that we don't have unlimited capacity, and we're trying to focus our responses on the areas that are of the most urgent and imminent need, responses that help to cover both the immediate health impacts, but also the emerging economic impacts. And it's not one of those things where we can just do everything all at once either. So what I would say is what we've announced so far is a part of our response that will help through this time. It's not going to make everybody whole. I think we need to manage expectations. It is not possible for governments to make everybody whole through this, but we need to try and do our best to help people keep the lights on, to help keep our economy moving forward. Follow the latest announcements on our government website. Those are the tools we have announced so far to help businesses through all of the challenging times they face, which would include the fact that perhaps business interruption insurance is not going to cover this interruption. As we turn the corner on the pandemic and we can focus solely on the economic recovery efforts, there may potentially be further announcements down the road on things that our government can do to help put us in the best position as a province to move our economy forward towards a recovery. So this is going to take time. We're all going to deal with some pain along the way. But all I ask is that you stay up to date with the information that we release as a government. We're working day and night to put Alberta in the strongest position possible, but it will take some time.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So this has become a big topic the last couple of days with the federal announcement. Is there any insight or clarity that you can provide around the newly announced Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program? Now, I know that's a federal program, but the Prime Minister in his announcement of that said he was going to work with the provinces to execute that. So we were just wondering if you had some information on that now that could help us out to give us some hope for May's rent coming up.
Nate,
Right.
maybe you can handle that.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, we're certainly aware of the challenging nature of the whole commercial rent situation. It's tricky, right? I mean, some of you might know, especially if you are landlords as a side business, or if that is your business, that a few weeks ago I announced some measures our government was taking related to residential rent protections. And you know, the reason I bring that up is because a lot of people have been asking me, well, what's going on with the commercial rent side of things? And the reason that this is more tricky is that with the residential side, we have the Residential Tenancies Act, we have the Mobile Home Sites Tenancies Act that governs the relationship between landlords and tenants. And through that, I was able to, as the minister responsible for those acts, take some actions to provide some clarity, some protection in the short term, but some clarity for tenants and landlords on what is expected of both of them in order to work through this crisis and to find some kind of a reasonable payment plan structure to navigate through until we're back to some kind of normal. And I think that has been well received. It was some very thoughtful policy that was very balanced. The challenge with commercial rents is there's no legislation that governs the relationship between a commercial tenant and a commercial landlord. It's essentially contract law. What's in your contract and what's in common law. That's what governs your relationship if there's a breach or if there's an unforeseen event such as this. And so what I will tell you, I mean, yes, the federal government did announce that they're working on something in this regard. And yes, our government is working with them to explore what that might look like. My colleague, Minister Tanya Furr from Economic Development, Trade and Tourism is leading that file on behalf of our government. So I don't have specifics or details. What I can tell you is we are working on it. We have been working on it for weeks, and now that the feds have spoken up on this too and have announced that they're working on this, we're collaborating with them as best we can. Recognizing May rent is the next big hurdle that is facing commercial tenants now. We're going to do whatever we can to work with the feds to make sure that we're not an obstacle to finding some kind of a measure for this. But I don't know what that's going to look like, and I would just have to say, please stay tuned. And as soon as we have something to announce, as soon as the feds have more detail to announce, then we can share that with you. And
Todd, can I just add something?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so just adding on Nate's comments, I would just say too that we are as a government encouraging, because again, we don't have a direct legal role in this, but encouraging commercial landlords and tenants to be reasonable with each other and understanding, and hopefully they can come to their own agreement until the federal government announces something, and the provincial governments will be informed and engaged on that file. I've talked to a lot of commercial tenants here in Sherwood Park, and I know they're struggling and really concerned about May's rent, and I know you're hearing that too, Todd. So again, we just ask everyone for patience, understanding, and reasonableness. And we also hope that, and I know the federal government is encouraging the financial institutions to be reasonable with their commercial landlords as well, because the whole system gets backed up. And we understand also the pressures that commercial landlords are under. So we just with everything with COVID-19, we need people to be reasonable, patient, and understanding, and we'll watch to see what the federal government announces on that front. But I know a lot of commercial tenants in Sherwood Park are hurting with regard to this. So we ask for landlords to be reasonable and understanding, but at the same time for tenants to understand that the landlords are also under pressure as well. It's a tough situation.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in there. Those are some really good points, Jordan, and I think thanks for bringing that up. I mean, so at the end of the day, landlords have an incentive to keep a paying tenant in their property. They don't, so if they're going to evict someone for non-payment of rent during a crisis, well, it's not like there's a whole bunch of businesses lined up at their door to take over that spot and be paying rent. So, this is a time where if you're a commercial tenant and you're struggling, we encourage you to work with your landlord to just be realistic about expectations and say, look, I can't pay all of my rent. Maybe I can pay some of my rent. I know that you've got a mortgage on your property, landlord, and so you need to be able to service that. And in order for you to negotiate with your bank on some kind of an exception during this time, you still need to be able to making some payment to your bank. So if I can pay you something, can we renegotiate something for the interim? And I think in most cases, those kinds of conversations are going to be well received. We know that not in every case, and that's why we continue to work with the federal government on what the government's role might be. But in the meantime, there's no better time than now to work with your landlord, or if you're a landlord, to work with your tenant to try and figure out something to keep your paying tenant, and for as a tenant to stay in your place so that you can continue to operate your business once the economic or once the healthcare restrictions are relaxed and you can get back to running your business more like normal. So I think, as is the case in almost everything in life, if you're being reasonable, you're working with your counterparty, being realistic about what's going on, often you can find a compromise that is agreeable to both sides. And in the event that you're unfortunately in the folks where that's not possible, then we just say, please stay tuned as we continue to work on potential solutions.
Thank you, Minister. So we were lucky enough to get you on for 40 minutes. We've actually been on this call for 45 minutes now. Just want to do a little check-in to see if you have another 10 minutes, 12 minutes to get us to the top of the hour.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good till 2.
As am I, Todd. That works.
Perfect. So we'll take a couple more questions, and then we'll do some closing remarks with our 2 MLAs. Our next question, and it's been answered a little bit, but I think there could be more clarity here. Uncertainty is unhelpful. What is the data point to determine when the economy resumes? Will new cases of COVID-19 in the fall trigger a repeat of the strategy? And we hear this a lot, whether it's going to be a V, a W, a U, or an L curve on this. And I think one of the biggest things businesses are stressed out about is the uncertainty. And, maybe you could once again talk a little bit about the different scenarios that could happen.
Sure. Sure. Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Jordan. I mean, these are great questions. These are questions we ask ourselves too, as a government, as we're trying to anticipate the trajectory of the virus and the economic impacts of it, and what our options are to respond. They're important questions, but we got to be realistic. I understand that uncertainty is an adversary for business that's difficult because it's an invisible enemy, right? You can't fight an invisible enemy. Same with the virus, right? This is an invisible enemy that we are battling against, and that's why this is so tough. Unfortunately, I can't eliminate the uncertainty for everyone in this room. Certainly our commitment to you, Jordan and I, as your local MLAs, our commitment to you is that we will be available and accessible. We will answer questions as they come up, and this is probably a good opportunity for us just to invite you. Once we've run out of time today, this doesn't have to be the only avenue for you to engage with us, and that's why we have constituency offices and we have staff here in Sherwood Park to help make sure that we can respond to your questions. And so would encourage you and invite you to make use of that with provincial COVID-19 related questions. But what I will say is any decisions to move back towards relaxation of restrictions is going to be evidence-based, and it's going to be focused on the medical impacts first. That's the most important part. Because if we get that part wrong, then we will have a reemergence, and we will have to, then the economic fallout will last longer, and the pain will be deeper. So I can't give you an answer on when. I can't give you an answer exactly what that's going to look like. What I can tell you is we've got some of the best medical experts in the country, and I would argue around the world, in Dr. Dina Henshaw and her team, who have put Alberta in a very good position relative to our peers across Canada and also relative to other jurisdictions around the world. And so I'm hopeful that means that we will come out of this stronger than others. Of course, we face different challenges related to the energy markets. That's unrelated to COVID, but strictly related to the management of the health crisis. We will emerge stronger than others. I'm confident of that. And our commitment to you is that we will continue to work day and night to make sure that we're making the best decisions based on the best information possible to put Alberta in that position to emerge from this stronger and faster. And our commitment is we'll be available to answer questions. Our government will continue to provide daily updates. For those of you where uncertainty is a challenge, I would encourage you to tune in every day. And it's usually between 3 and 4 o'clock when the Premier and Dr. Henshaw give their daily announcement. This information is super helpful and important, and it's happening every single day. So, aside from that, there's not much more we can do to remove uncertainty that wouldn't end up being promising things we can't deliver. So that would be my. And I guess just touching on the potential of a fall resurgence, we know that that's a risk, and we're mindful of that, and we're considering that in all of our decision-making processes to make sure that we minimize the risk going forward as we consider the reopening of the economy, the relaxation of the health measures, but also the preparation and anticipation of potential risks in the upcoming fall and winter season.
Mr. Walker?
No, I think Nate answered that very thoroughly, Todd. And I think we'll go to any final questions in the closing time here, or just go to closing remarks. But thank you.
Okay, thank you. So one more that is on the top of everyone's mind here in Alberta, and I know there's no quick answer to this. And the federal government's got some things in the hopper for this. What kind of oil and gas relief are you asking and expecting from the federal government in the coming weeks?
So Nate, I can start with this.
Sure.
If that's yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So first of all, we understand and recognize and greatly appreciate the work of our energy sector and energy workers. Alberta's economy since we struck major oil in February 1947 has been the foundation of our economy, and including here in Strathcona County, where 30% of our energy or revenue, municipal revenues come from the energy sector, and we're very thankful for all of the prosperity generated by that. So a couple things our provincial government has done. We have made extensions for oil and gas tenors. We're extending the term of mineral agreements expiring in 2020 by 1 year. This will give increased certainty. We understand, as Nate pointed out, how important business certainty is. This will provide increased certainty for industry by allowing additional time to raise capital and plan for future activities. And then something else we're very excited about in conjunction with the federal government's big liquidity package announcement today for the energy sector is we have announced a $100 million loan for the Orphan Well Association. We've extended that to bolster the immediate reclamation efforts to decommission about 1,000 orphan wells, and we'll start more than 1,000 environmental assessments. This will put a tremendous amount of Albertans back to work immediately. So that's on the provincial side. And then what the federal government has just announced, and the premier, apparently he just released a statement on this, and so that's amazing news. The federal government has announced a $1.7 billion liquidity package to accelerate the cleanup of orphaned and abandoned wells in Canada's energy sector, disproportionately here in Alberta, obviously. This will be critical, again, to getting thousands of Albertans back to work. So on top of extending the mineral rights, the $100 million our government has announced for the orphan wells reclamation efforts, we now have almost $2 billion from the federal government. So we're very pleased about that. And here in Alberta, we have right now up to 3,400 wells that are currently being reclaimed, and there's another 94,000 that may be eventually become orphans. So a lot of work to come, putting people back to work, shovel-ready projects, if you will. Very exciting news. Nate, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just add, so I mean, that I think covers really well some of the provincial pieces that we've been focused on, and also some very timely announcement from the feds and our premier on the orphan well piece. But make no mistake, we are working very hard. Our premier, our energy minister, Minister Savage, and our associate minister for natural gas and electricity, Minister Dale Nally, are working very hard to remind the federal government of how, the oil and gas industry is the largest subsector industry in Canada, hundreds of thousands of jobs. And the Alberta oil and gas industry has sent close to $600 billion of resources to the federal government over the last 20 years. So it is absolutely critically important that at this time, that the federal government recognize that contribution to the Federation and respond with a sizable and significant liquidity package to the oil and gas sector to allow them to navigate through this challenging time. We've been talking with our counterparts federally on this. We're expecting something in the tens of billions of dollars, which I think is certainly appropriate given the outsized contribution that Alberta and our oil and gas industry have made to Canada over the last number of decades. So we will continue fighting every day on this and pushing and persuading and making every logical argument possible. And then where logic doesn't always prevail with our counterparts, then sometimes maybe it's appealing to emotion. It's appealing to our provincial peers to advocate on our behalf. Our premier has been working very hard to build rapport with his counterparts in every other province, and I can assure you that on the latest calls between the premiers and the prime minister, we've had unanimous support from every other premier advocating to the prime minister on Alberta's behalf to say that Alberta needs support from Canada. Now is the time for Canada to give that support. Alberta has, so all of the arguments we've been making, we have the support from other premiers. We just need the feds to respond, and I firmly believe that our odds are higher of this, given who it is that's advocating on our behalf and the approach we're taking. This will be a critical component to helping to slow the decline in the economy, and to at least allow us to dig in, retrench, and have our biggest industry, first of all, survive, and second of all, start planning for a path to recovery. So stay tuned for that. Know that we're on the job. We recognize that this is an existential threat if we don't get this right. It's about time for the feds to respond in a positive way, given what we've done as a province for the country. And even just to tie back, I know that when our premier announced the sharing of PPE to other jurisdictions, you may have seen that announcement a while ago. there were no strings attached to that. We did it because it's the right thing to do. But I have to believe that a gesture like that continues to garner us goodwill and demonstrate to the feds that, hey, we're helping in every way that we possibly can, but we do need some help ourselves. And so I think we're taking all the steps that we can to put Alberta in the best position possible to receive the support it requires from the feds, but also to take the actions inside of our own control to put us into a strong position as we approach a recovery. So I hope that's some helpful context.
Yes, thank you, Minister. So I think that's going to conclude our questions. We do have a lot now that we didn't have when we started. People have been filling in the Slido program quite a bit here with new questions. I'm wondering if Minister Glubish and Mr. Walker, if we sent the ones that are provincial in scope and business related, if you could provide us with some answers to them, and we'll get them posted on our website so that the rest of the questions are addressed.
Yeah, we would be happy to follow up on that.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So if, first of all, I want to thank you both for your time. And if you have closing remarks, maybe Mr. Walker could go first, or Minister Glubish could.
Go ahead.
Yeah, great, Todd. Thank you so much. And Todd, just before I give a very brief closing remark, I just want to cover 3 items that we didn't unfortunately have time to cover that I think are very important. So just a lightning round here, Todd. First of all, I wanted to point out too that I know you got our businesses are such great donors and givers to our civil society here in Strathcona County, and we can only be as strong as we are in our civil society. Government can't resolve the COVID-19 crisis on its own. About 2 weeks ago, our government announced a civil society initiative where we're providing $30 million in funding to the municipal family and community supports programs that are within municipalities, in our case, Strathcona County. It's 80% funded, that agency, by the provincial government. And Strathcona County now has its own pot of money, if you will. And so if you know of a civil society group, or perhaps you are a member of the chamber like Saffron is, or Parents Empowering Parents, I would encourage you to look at that money that's available to assist you in assisting the most vulnerable who are really perhaps struggling during this time through the COVID-19 pandemic. And if you know any civil society group that could really make a positive impact for our most vulnerable, please let them know about that and contact FCSS here in Strathcona County. Also, on the civil society initiative front, our government just announced a matching grant program that opened up yesterday, I believe. We will match up to $2 million, dollar for dollar, in donations to registered charities and groups from now until May 31st. So I've had a lot of very generous business people here in Sherwood Park ask me, I'd like to give, I'd like to donate, what should I do? And I would say donate now, because if you donate $500, the government's going to match that with its own $500 donation. So you'll have a tremendous financial impact. And see mine or Nate's Facebook page, or alberta.ca/COVID-19 for more information on that, and a link of registered charities that are there, and there's others as well. And then finally, I wanted to point out, and we touched on it briefly, around the personal protective equipment. I just want to let everyone know that as of now, we just recently announced that for non-AHS, Alberta Health Services facilities, such as pharmacies, I know we have a lot of pharmacies here in Sherwood Park, and they're doing tremendous work in a difficult time, and a dangerous time. So non-AHS facilities such as pharmacies, disability service providers, social service and civil society groups, and independent medical clinics can now submit requests for PPE by email. And Todd, maybe we will send you that email, because I know a lot of pharmacies in Sherwood Park have been asking our office, I want PPE, how do I get it? I feel exposed, and understandably so. We are also the leading jurisdiction in Canada when it comes to the PPE, through the tremendous procurement efforts of AHS and other related agencies. And so all our frontline essential workers, including pharmacists, should be able to get PPE. And Todd, we'll send you that link, and it's also on our Facebook pages. So excited about that. And now, just in closing, I again want to say thank you all for all you do to make Sherwood Park and Strathcona County a prosperous place and the best place to live in Alberta and, frankly, Canada. We have a tremendous quality of life. We have been through crises before. We will get through this one together as a community. And a critical plank of our community is our business community. We understand greatly that businesses are struggling right now. And so I hope today we've given you some answers, some confidence, and some encouragement going forward. And I would reiterate, don't hesitate to reach out to our offices. We're experiencing obviously a high volume of traffic right now, both in correspondence and telephone. Please, we ask for your patience, but we will get back to you. And I just, again, can't thank you guys enough. Alberta is the entrepreneurial hub of Canada. You guys are the doers and deciders who have driven our economy forward since we became a province in 1905. With that, thank you all, and I'll turn it back to Nate.
Sure, thanks, Jordan. So I think that lightning round was very timely and great to highlight. And I'll just highlight again on the PPE side. You know, sometimes it's good to talk about some good news, something to be encouraged about. And as Jordan alluded to, we have a benefit because Alberta is a single integrated healthcare system. We have the best procurement system in Canada for healthcare equipment, but also one of the best in the world. And thanks to the brilliant foresight of our team at AHS and the Department of Health, as soon as there was any conversation about this virus, the strange virus in China emerging, they immediately began placing massive orders for PPE, which is why we are in the position today where we have more than enough to last us beyond July, and yet our counterparts in Ontario and Quebec only had 3 or 4 days worth of supply. So by orders of magnitude, we are more prepared than anywhere else in the world. And that is why we were in a position to help our peers across Canada. But as Jordan mentioned, we're not doing that at the expense of our other locations across Alberta. So if you know of these frontline providers who are not a direct part of the healthcare system, but who are providing services, medical services to Albertans, who need access to PPE and maybe don't have the equipment they need, please go to our website, the government website, or to our Jordan and my Facebook pages, and you'll find a link to an email address that people can email to explain their need, and we will respond accordingly. One other thing I just wanted to highlight that as a part of Jordan's lightning round is we understand that at this time, a lot of Albertans are really facing difficult challenges personally, and that can affect our mental health. And you know, our government has certainly been very committed to stepping up and addressing mental health and addiction concerns across Alberta. That's why in our election campaign we committed $140 million additional funding to that. But our premier recently announced a few days ago, on top of that, an additional $53 million of funding to mental health and addiction supports for those Albertans who are in need of additional support. So if you or a family member or someone you know is having a tough time and they just need some help to navigate this crisis from a mental health perspective, all of the existing resources have been amplified through this. So the Alberta Mental Health Helpline is available 24/7, toll-free. Alberta's Addiction Helpline is available toll-free 24/7. The Kids Help Phone is available 24/7, which allows for professional counseling and many other services. The Crisis Text Line in Alberta is available. So we're taking significant steps to contribute resources to an area, in knowing that this is going to be a significant challenge for all Albertans moving forward. And that in order for us to tackle the recovery with putting our strongest foot forward, we need to do that from a strong mental state of mind. And that is why we're stepping up so quickly in anticipation of this to allocate additional resources to this. So Just wanted to highlight that as something that didn't come up in our conversation, but I think is very important and an important step that our government is taking. So once again, thank you to Todd and John and the team at the Chamber for organizing this. I hope you all found this helpful. I know we maybe didn't get to every question, but as Jordan said, we'll work with all of the folks who had provincial government related questions and do our best to get back to you in a timely manner. But we're just grateful for this opportunity, for you all taking time out of your day and for the Chamber for taking time to organize and facilitate this. We hope it was helpful, and just know that Jordan and I are both here as your local MLAs to help explain what our government is doing, why we're doing it, and to answer your questions. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Todd.
Thank you very much, Minister. And thank you to the members for participating today. A very big thanks to Minister Glubish and Mr. Walker for your time today. Your knowledge, your passion, your work ethic are second to none. We know how busy you are, and we appreciate the time that you've given us today and your support. So one more thing to the membership. Please give us some comments. Send them to info@sherwood.parkassembly.ab.ca and let us know what you think of this. We want to do more of these with elected officials from other jurisdictions. And we know what the struggle is. We hear it every day, and the Chamber is a family of businesses, and to hear the stories, it's heartbreaking to hear them, and know that we're here to help you any way we can. And thank you for today, and this concludes our meeting. Thank you.